I'm a little nervous giving this homily, and it's not because it's a controversial homily. At least I hope it's not a controversial homily. Instead, it's because this will be the last time I'm preaching here at St. Ambrose for about a month. Actually, it will be a month. You see, next week, and I'm taking the weekend off because my sister is getting married. And so I figure if I'm going to party all night long, trust me, I'm not going to party all night long, but if I'm going to be out a little bit late on Saturday night, I better take the weekend off. And the next weekend, we have Bishop Drew coming for our parish mission. He's going to preach. And the next weekend after that, we have Archbishop Neinstead, the Archbishop's appeal, and I believe there'll be a video for that. And finally, the weekend after that, I'll be leading a tech retreat. And I look back and I think, when's the last time I've gone 4 weeks without preaching in a parish? And to be honest with you, never. So I figure I better make this homily count, right? Not that all the other homilies don't count. They do. I try my hardest. Like this one, special grace or something that I'm asking the Holy Spirit to help me with. Now, it may make sense, seeing as how my sister is getting married next week, and that I'd preach on the wedding feast at Cana, but I'm not going to. Instead, I'm going to focus on our second reading. And the second reading is all about some of the gifts that God has given to the community of Corinth, to the Corinthians, as Paul would say, and how it's all from the same God. But who is it for? It's for the benefit of the community. I think there's a great analogy to this, and I want to start off this analogy. When I was in high school, I played football, and I was an offensive lineman. I thought when I was a freshman I was going to be a professional football player. I thought when I was a sophomore maybe I'll be a Division I football player. By the time I was a junior, like maybe Division II or III. And by the time I was a senior, not starting, I knew I was not going to be a college football player. But I do have an excuse for this. I went to a very good high school for football. I went to Cretin-Derham Hall High School. When I was a junior, we had a scrimmage against St. Thomas Academy. And St. Thomas Academy is where my brother Luke went, and he played on their football team. So I was playing offensive line, and Luke convinced his coaches, when I was out there, he convinced his coaches that he should go out there and play defensive tackle so he can go against me, his brother. Now, an offensive line, you always have to remember what has to go on an offensive line. Each and every one of us had our own responsibilities. And the play would only be successful if we followed out this responsibility. If I was supposed to block the tackle, I blocked the tackle. If I was supposed to block the end, I blocked the end. If I was supposed to shed that block and go to the linebacker, I do that. But the only way a play was successful is when each and every one of us did our individual blocks the way that it was drawn up. When we went off to a different style, usually the play would be unsuccessful. So there I am, a junior in high school, not very mature, hopefully a little more mature now, but back then not very mature, and I look across from me, and there's my brother Luke, number 75. For St. Thomas Academy. I was number 74 for Cretin-Derham Hall. And I finally figured this will be the time I get to block my brother, I get to hit him and not get in trouble. So we line up, and I start blocking. We put him on the ground, and I look to the left of me, and I think, why is the guard blocking with me? Whatever, we're beating my brother together. This is awesome, right? So we put him on the ground, it's awesome, and all of a sudden the play gets over, and I look back, and the quarterback's on the ground, he's been sacked, and all of a sudden I hear, Carlson! I look back, yeah, hi, coach, right? That kind of looked like, yeah. They're like, get back. So they pull me out of the game, and they say, what are you doing? I say, well, I was blocking. That's what I was doing. Who were you blocking? The tackle, who was my brother. Good. Did you put him on the ground? Yeah. I said, yeah, I did. But they said, what happened to the defensive end you were supposed to block? Oh, yeah, he kind of sacked the quarterback, didn't he? Right? I did not follow my responsibility. I had a plan. I was supposed to block the defensive end, but I was selfish. I thought, no, I'm going to block my brother. And I put him on the ground. It was awesome, but then I got pulled from the game, all right? It wasn't exactly the best moment because I was not following what the coaches wanted for me. You know, in our letter today from St. Paul to the Corinthians, he's telling them, each and every one of them have gifts that they have been given by God. The gifts of what? The gifts of wisdom, the gifts of knowledge, faith, gifts of healing, gifts of mighty deeds, of prophecy, discernment of spirits, varieties of tongues, interpretation of tongues, all these great gifts. But they're not supposed to be used for their own selfish gain. They're supposed to be used for what, as St. Paul would say, they're supposed to be used for the benefit of the community. You and I have been given gifts by God. Your gifts are different than your wife's or your husband. Your gifts are different than the person sitting next to you. They're not better. They're not worse. They're gifts given to you by God. But what God is telling us is that they're not supposed to be used for our own individualistic gain, our own selfish gain. These gifts that God has given us are supposed to be used for the community. Supposed to be used for here, the Church of St. Ambrose. What we like to call this, when we use our gifts as God has prescribed to us, what it means is that we're using the gifts for the common good, the good of us all. Now, yes, these may be great gifts. We can look at some of the saints. We can look at Mother Teresa. And what did she do? All the gifts that God had given her, the gift of love. Think about that. A great gift of love, that she could love the sickest of the sick, the poorest of the poor. Not all of us can do that. We can't. Not all of us can look at a leper and feel love. She had this gift, but what did she use it for? Not to build herself up, but rather she used it for the common good. She used it so that other people could experience this love of God as well. Look at John Paul II, and all the great work that he did not only for the Catholic Church, but what he did in his home country of Poland. He gave them hope. He gave them inspiration. Even though they were underneath this communist rule, he gave them freedom. Freedom that they could be themselves. Why? Just by his example, and just by the way that he lived out his responsibility. Now, you and I, more than likely, are not called to be popes. You and I are probably not called to be like Mother Teresa and all the glorious things and how marvelous she did, because those are special gifts given to her. But you have a responsibility. So we say in the Catholic Church, you have a duty of life. And what you are called to do is to live it out. But what for? What are you living for? What are we using the gifts that God has given us for? If we simply use them for our selfish gain, then yeah, there might be some pleasure in it. But just like that football play, what's going to happen? You're going to get pulled. What does that mean? That's up for your own interpretation, right? But if we use the gifts that God has given us, not for our own good, but for the common good, then what difference will we make? We'll make this community, we'll make this church a better place because we are serving something, someone greater than ourselves. We look at Jesus Christ, and of course we look at him on the cross once again. And what does he do? He uses all the gifts. He uses all the gifts that God has given him. God himself. But he doesn't use them for himself. He uses them for us. He sees that we are called to give of ourselves for something, for someone greater than ourselves. Today, my brothers and sisters, let us acknowledge the gifts that God has given you, the talents, the treasures, and you have them. We all do. Let's acknowledge them and use them, but not for ourselves, but for the benefit of our brothers and our sisters, for the benefit of the common good.